The new ASUS TUF A14 is one of the first mainstream laptops with AMD's extremely popular Strix Halo processor, and about time. Strix Halo is an APU combining a very powerful CPU with a powerful integrated GPU. Compared to Intel's new Panther Lake X chips, which are similar, Strix Halo actually performs better. It delivers low to mid-range gaming performance in modern titles, similar to, say, a full-powered 5050. Now, Panther Lake, on the other hand, it's similar to a low-wattage 5050. But Panther Lake laptops, they can give you better battery life. Anyway, back on the TUF itself, it's been one of our favourite laptops for some time now. It actually won our best 14-inch gaming laptop last year. That's because it's just very comfortable to use. It feels noticeably cooler under load, and it's also lighter and thinner than most competitors. It also has solid battery life for a gaming laptop. And with this iteration, it's just the processor that's really changed. But ultimately, and unfortunately, this config is just way too darn expensive. At the time I filmed this section, it was going for $2,200. You can buy last year's model with a more powerful dedicated GPU on sale for $1,500. That's $700 less. I don't know what ASUS's pricing team is smoking here. I'll just link last year's model down below, as right now, that's obviously what you should buy. Also, since the TUF with Strix Halo has 32GB of memory, not the max 128, it kind of loses some of the secret sauce of Strix Halo. You see, that chip is really appealing to AI developers, as they can assign a lot of memory to the GPU and run large models. You can't really do that with 32GB. So again, I'm not sure why anyone would buy this config. Perhaps it's cheaper where you are, or something will change. Anyway, Sierra's done all the hard work here, so I'm going to hand over to her for our full review.
Thanks, Josh. Let's start with gaming performance, since this is a gaming laptop. The Ryzen AI Max Plus 392 processor in it has the max 40-core GPU that Strix Halo can come with. In TimeSpy, it lands above other integrated GPUs like the Arc B390 and Intel's brand new Panther Lake X chips, but it falls behind the NVIDIA RTX 5060 in last year's TUF and Lenovo's budget Lock 15. When we look at Port Royal, a ray tracing benchmark, this GPU performs the worst. This is likely because this GPU does not have ray tracing cores like its competitors. In Steel Nomad Lite, which enables us to compare with Apple's processors, it performs very well, beating out both the MacBook Pro chips we're comparing it to here. Let's now take a look at some games. We actually have two different settings that we test games on, high-end and low-end. High-end uses higher in-game settings at 2560 by 1600. Low-end is mid-range in-game settings at 1920 by 1200 resolution. This processor's performance sits right on the edge between those two options. Its native screen resolution is 2560 by 1600, but when we tested it at that resolution in Cyberpunk, we didn't get great results, around 40 FPS even with upscaling on. So we decided to run the rest of the tests on low-end settings, as that would be our recommendation for the smoothest gameplay experience. Plus, 1920 by 1200 resolution for gaming on a small 14-inch screen is totally fine. This also means the comparison laptops in our graphs may change based on which laptops we tested with these settings. In Cyberpunk, this TUF averaged 90 FPS with 1% lows, almost hitting 60. These results are good, but fall behind our Flow Z13, which has the highest-end Strix Halo 395 chip. Same GPU, but more powerful CPU. This TUF is also way behind the high-wattage 5060 in last year's TUF and the full-wattage 5060 in the Legion 5i. When we turn frame gen on, we do see a nice improvement. It's now beating the Flow Z13, but it's still not as good as the full-wattage 5060 in the Legion or last year's TUF. Looking at Marvel Rivals, which is a more demanding game, the TUF falls behind. This one surprised us, as we thought Marvel Rivals was a more CPU-demanding game, and the CPU in this year's TUF is more powerful than last year's. This is our hypothesis. During gaming, manufacturers reduce power fed to the CPU to allow the GPU to consume more. Perhaps the less powerful Ryzen 7 processor in last year's TUF is able to perform better at lower power levels. Moving on to Forza Horizon 5, which is a game that does a good job of taxing both the CPU and GPU at the same time, the TUF does very well. It pulls slightly ahead of the Flow Z13 and ties with the dedicated 4060 in the 13-inch ProArt. Let's now take a look at thermals during gaming. This year's model stayed cooler on the keyboard deck than last year's, which is a win. In fact, it's one of the coolest feeling laptops we've tested. Plus, the fan noise is quieter than last year's model. The Panther Lake Dell XPS and ASUS ExpertBook are really the only laptops that stay quiet here, but those are more thin and light laptops, not gaming ones, and they do perform worse as I showed you. Anyway, all of this was on the TUF's highest stock performance mode. Looking at the A14 running Forza on each of its performance modes, we see a modest drop in performance for a big drop in fan noise if you game on performance mode, not turbo. If you decide you want to try out manual mode, we actually saw a minor drop in performance from turbo. Same goes for G-Helper, a third-party performance tuning app for ASUS gaming laptops. Here we saw another minor drop in performance from turbo. Next, we'll look at CPU performance, which is where these Strix Halo processors shine. Please note, though, the 392 chip in our TUF has 12 Zen 5 CPU cores, rather than the 16 in the highest-end Strix Halo 395 processor from last year's Flow Z13. Regardless, in Geekbench, this laptop rivals the multi-core performance of Apple's M5. This is especially good considering MacBooks tend to do really well in this test. The TUF score is also a whopping 39% improvement over the lower-end Ryzen 7 chip in last year's model. Geekbench doesn't hit the CPU that hard, though. It just tests a bunch of common performance tasks. So let's move over to Cinebench 2026, which maxes out the CPU. Here, the TUF A14 really shines, almost hitting the multi-core performance of a MacBook Pro 14 with the higher-end M4 Pro chip. AMD does need to work on Zen 5's single-core performance, though. It's a bit lackluster. Anyway, part of the reason this laptop is performing so well is that it's pulling a ridiculous amount of power. It maxes at over 114 watts and averages 98. This is one area where you can really see how far ahead Apple's M-series chips are. They are so much more power efficient. Same with Intel's Panther Lake. Despite this extra power, it looks like the TUF's cooling solution is still doing a decent job of cooling the processor. It hits 95 Celsius for some bursts of power, but it averages at 70. These aren't bad numbers given at how small this chassis is and how much power runs through it. When it comes to heat you actually feel during CPU tasks, this model is warmer than last year's, which makes sense as that one has a less powerful Ryzen 7 CPU and it's not activating its dedicated GPU. The new TUF isn't bad here, though. It's about the same as it was in gaming, which is still decently comfortable. For fan noise, it's around the same as last year's model, very loud at 55 decibels when on its turbo mode. Of course, we tried the other modes too. Performance mode drops the power fed to the CPU, resulting in a modest drop in performance, but you get a lot less fan noise for similar keyboard deck temps. Just touching on creator tasks real quick, in Premiere Pro, the new TUF falls way behind laptops with an NVIDIA GPU, but it does hold its own against the MacBook Pros. Lastly, let's test the laptop unplugged. When doing performance tasks, it is able to maintain 90% of its performance. Way better than the Ryzen 7 model from last year, whose performance unplugged absolutely tanks. But where the TUF really shines is how long it lasts on battery for basic tasks. We ran our new tougher battery test. No pun intended. This new TUF did really well. Over 9 hours is really good. That being said, Panther Lake is capable of better battery life in some laptops. The XPS 14, which also relies on an integrated GPU, lasts an additional 3 hours. And the Panther Lake lock has a smaller battery and a larger screen to power, and it tied with this laptop. For Linux, we booted up Fedora 43 and almost everything worked except for the speakers. This would probably be fixed with a full install and kernel update. Alright, the rest of the TUF A14 is almost the same as it was last year, so I'm just going to go over its pros and cons. I'll link our full review of last year's down below if you want more details. The TUF A14's pros are that it is super lightweight and very portable considering how much performance it packs. The keyboard is another highlight, with an ample 1.7mm of key travel and a satisfying click. Its trackpad seems to be slightly improved this year with a quieter click, but it is still mechanical. The screen gets nice and bright around 500 nits, and the display has a matte finish, both of which should help you combat reflections in brighter environments. Ports are also a positive, with a decent selection for its size. On the left, we have its proprietary charging port, HDMI 2.1, a 40GB USB-C port that supports 100-watt charging, a 10GB USB-A port, and a headphone mic combo jack. On the right, we have another 10GB USB-A port, a 10GB USB-C port, and a microSD card reader. The speakers are also decent for a laptop this size. They get pretty loud and don't sound distorted, although they are still a bit muddy like most laptop speakers, plus they face downwards, so you may lose volume when using it on a blanket. Take a listen. Now let's get into its cons. Firstly, the screen is an IPS panel, not an OLED. At this price point, that's just crazy. It just doesn't look as vibrant as other laptops because IPS panels can't display true blacks. The colors on the screen are also limiting for professional color work. It covers 98% of sRGB, which is good enough for most people, but only 75% of Adobe RGB and 77% of P3. Back on the chassis itself, it looks a bit boring and doesn't feel premium. It's essentially a value-for-money laptop with a premium price attached. So no surprises, it just doesn't look or feel as nice as competitors. On that note, even though it is lightweight, as I said, it's not as light as other laptops that don't have a dedicated GPU. This model actually weighs slightly more than last year's and way more than something like ASUS's own ExpertBook Ultra with its Panther Lake X chip. The 1080p webcam is another con for the TUF A14. It does have IR for Windows Hello, but the colors look quite a bit off. And here's how the webcam looks and sounds in normal lighting conditions in my office. I feel that it looks pretty grainy. So, what are the alternatives? At this price point, there are quite a few. If you want a better gaming experience, the TUF A14 from last year is a better option, and at the time we filmed this video, it was literally $500 cheaper. If you want something more budget-friendly than that, the new lock with Panther Lake is awesome. It performs better in games, and its larger 15.3-inch screen is more immersive for gaming. Its main downside is that it is much heavier. If you want a more premium laptop than the lock and you're okay with the weight, step up to Lenovo's new Legion 5i with Panther Lake. It has an OLED screen. We are just finishing our review of that one, so get subscribed with the notification bell on so you'll be the first to find out. If, on the other hand, you aren't playing intensive games and could deal with a weaker GPU, a laptop with a Panther Lake X chip like ASUS's ExpertBook Ultra is a great alternative. Finally, if you are just looking at this for coding or creative work, we'd recommend considering a MacBook Pro over the TUF. You can get a new MacBook Pro 14 with an M5 Pro chip for the price of this laptop, and it's just a more premium all-round device. To look at any of the laptops we showed you today, check out our website, bestlaptop.deals. We track prices at different retailers and let you set price drop notifications if something falls into your budget. Well, that's all we got for you today. I hope you liked this video. We really are trying to get to 400,000 subscribers this year, so if you can help us out, the whole team and I would really appreciate it. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will catch you later.